What if I was like,
Hello, everyone. Welcome to ADD Masterminds. I was gonna say the Wax Museum, and I'm like, because I haven't we never do ADD Masterminds. But
yeah,
anyways, welcome. I am Bridge Levot, and we have the girl here.
hey, missed ya.
Hey, I missed you too. This is so good that we're like, I know. And I was like, I think there was a point too where I was like, I kind of got this feeling that you were taking it personally that we haven't done ADD Masterminds in a
If
while.
there was like episode after episode that I was not in, maybe. But
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
It's like those boys, they're mean.
Yeah.
All good.
So I first of all, I'd like to say I love that we still don't talk politics on this show.
Yes, we have to keep that up.
I think we need like a safe space where people, I said safe space. That's a political thing. Because like caring about victims and people who could be re-traumatized, that's a political thing.
Right.
Oh, I just did that. I took a side, didn't I?
Dang
it. Okay, so I also don't think we should talk about the queen that died. But I was thinking about this, like this something that kind of bothered me about this whole thing is like how many people are just like, she was a good Christian woman, and they're posting quotes about Christianity from her. Right. And I'm just like, whenever we find somebody who we can hitch our wagon to and say, this is a Christian celebrity.
Yeah.
I remember when Passion of the Christ came out, and Mel Gibson, I was like, he's a Christian just like us.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, like he's like getting stopped by a traffic cop who's a female,
saying some interesting things,
some very interesting things. And I'm like, and I think it was after that I decided, you know what? I'm not going to hitch my faith to a celebrity.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, Justin Bieber's a Christian. I'm like, oh yeah.
No, we love to do that. We did that to Kanye several times. Jesus Walks came out and we were like, yeah. And then, all of his new music came out. We love to do that.
Yeah. It's just, this is a bad scene.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no. And I mean, the other thing I don't want to talk about is Black Ariel.
Okay.
But I do want to talk about representation in media.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting because like this becomes such a political issue where people are like, oh, it's ridiculous. They're being woke because they're putting, Black people in this show or whatever. But I'm like, I think what's really interesting, if you talk to like a little girl who's Black and they go to watch this film, it's going to mean a lot to them that there's someone that looks like them that's in this film.
Oh, absolutely. I remember that even with Black Panther, that, fathers were taking pictures of their little boys, like this boy is a king, he's not being influenced by like a bad media representation, but this boy is a king of Wakanda right now. It's huge. And I don't think I got that for a very long time because Disney princesses kind of looked like me and my kids and whatever. Especially like, I feel like when we went to Disney and seeing little girls meet like Tiana that were very happy to like wear her dress and look like her, seeing when you're represented, you don't see who isn't. It's really a blind spot. So I know we're not talking about it, but I'm thrilled about it. I showed my daughter the trailer and her only comment was like, when does it come out? How long? When can we go see it? Like, she's thrilled. She's so excited.
Yeah. And I mean, like, really interesting too, because we tend to think of these things, in political terms. And but it's like, what about that little girl, right? That little girl who finally feels like, oh, someone that looks like me. And I when we talk about like my dog was just barking up. Okay, you hear him? My dog. He saw someone outside and they're on a bike. And I need to say something about them being on a bike. Yeah.
Oh, my dog is so distrustful of bicycles as well. Like we got him good with strollers because I don't want him barking at babies. But it's bikes.
Okay, hold on. I got to deal with the dog, and I think I might have people here too. So okay, I'm just gonna stop recording for a bit, and I'll come back and we'll resume.
There we go.
All right. So like I had to go deal with dog and I came back.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking about like
my dog hates
Mine
bikes.
freaks out at bikes.
On people on bikes, like bikes
Yeah.
just on the street. Thankfully,
Yeah.
again, like I was saying, he's good with strollers because I don't want him barking at babies, but he hates bikes. And it's something, we've got to work on because
Yeah.
he's an ESA, because panic attacks and craziness. And the
Mm,
second he came in the house, even like my resting heart rate was like, oh, okay, so it's
mm.
like a legit thing. And we're going to be training him to be a psychiatric service dog. So he'll be able
Okay.
to like anticipate panic attacks and learn
Oh,
like what
wow.
to do to help me with that.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting when because we had to move because
Mm,
when he was and not trained yet, he woke my landlord up and made him mad. And so he literally kicked us out, which was technically fully illegal. But in looking for a new place, there were just so many people who were like, no, you can't have pets. And I was like,
mm,
I have a prescription for him. Like
mm.
he's going to be a full service dog. Like he's a medical necessity. You
Yeah.
can't say no to him. And there was like, well, the landlord doesn't want dogs because of their floors. And I'm like, does he
Right.
also not want like wheelchairs because of his floors? You can't do that. Like,
Mm,
and it just, I mean, for me, it's this small, not that panic attacks are a smaller thing, but for somebody who's genuinely can't see, can't hear, like dogs that are their hands and feet and eyes and ears,
right.
this idea of like, people can just, and I had a realtor call me up and say like, well, how do we get around that? And I'm like, the law? I can't help you with that.
Mm,
What if I had someone who was concerned and I was like, and how do we get around that? I'm like, well, it's the ADA. It's a federal law that you can't. That's just ridiculous. But it was an interesting trip. So we're trying to get them pretty calm around everything, including, those shady bicycles.
dang.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, my dog just doesn't calm down unless he wants to. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's also my wife's dog. So it's
Okay.
like, all right, well, I'll take him for a walk. He's probably gonna freak out at the cars. But you got a nice like I don't know what you call it. If you call it a boulevard, I think that's what you call it. But it's like there's like a big gap between like between the sidewalk and the road.
Oh, sure.
So if
Yeah.
you have that, I can like long leash him because I've got one of those leashes that you can like retract,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then I'll just let him wander a bit more. And I think he's pretty chill about on the cars. But it's like whenever I go to a location where it's closer to the cars, it'll be like
Cars.
the first 10 cars he'll freak out at, and then he'll be chill after that.
Huh. Okay.
I
They're
don't
a
know.
threat.
The mind of a dog, crazy.
Who could know?
It'd be crazy. But yeah, when we were talking about like representation,
Mhm.
um, I was thinking about like how like again, like it's just so political and it's like, oh, we don't need to be politically correct in how we, represent Jesus or whatever. But it's like actually every culture has done this. Every culture
Right.
has their own version of Jesus.
Right.
And it's just the white one became so predominant because white culture dominated everything.
Right.
And it's funny in my group bear with community that I'm in,
Mhm.
um, we have like a guy who's half Korean, and we were talking about white Jesus, and he's like, "Oh, there's a Korean Jesus," and I'm like, "Korean Jesus is really cool looking. Like he looks cooler than white Jesus."
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I want a cool Jesus. But anyways, I don't know. It's just interesting, and I mean, like part of it too is like I didn't know it was such a big deal until I was talking to this girl who was like, she's in her 20s, Debbie from Twitter.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And she's of Indian descent,
Mhm.
and she talked about how like it was really hard growing up with a white Jesus because people assumed because she's brown that she's not Christian.
Oh,
And
ow.
it's just kind of interesting how like there's just a lot of racial dynamics that
Huh.
it's like I don't understand because I
Yeah.
never grew up with that. And so
Right.
I'm not going to use the political P word for where you don't experience the things that other people do because I know
Right.
that certain people would be put off by that.
Sure.
But like it's like there's just a lot of things I don't experience. And so
Mhm.
when I hear people talk about their experience, I feel like I need to believe them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I mean, that kind of makes me think too about people's stories and how
Yeah.
everybody has a different story. And like, like I know a guy who tells me stories, and it's like he's been through hell. It's been a lot of bad things.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I wouldn't go ask his family. Now I want to hear their story because their story is different.
Okay.
And then it's my job to decide what the truth is. It's like I
Right.
can't do that. Like I just need to be there for my friend.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's like, does it mean that um I'm not going to tell everybody the story from their perspective and try to get people to believe the same story? And it's like, I don't think
Mm.
that's my job. I think my job is just to hear my friend and hear their story and
I like
understand
that.
that's how they
Yeah.
see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
But all right. So you wanted to talk about parent child or parent adult child relationship.
Yeah. I yeah, I don't know. I'm dealing just a bit with my dad right now with kind
Mm-hmm.
of, and if he finds this episode, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
But with what I thought our relationship looked just fine, and I'm getting from him that it's not how he wanted it to look. It's very, on his end, it feels very distant. We're
Mm,
not. And on my end, I'm like, we were texting every day. I was seeing you pretty often. Like, so I don't know if what do you think like a healthy adult child to parent relationship looks like? Like I've been telling my kids since like these conversations
yeah.
happened. Like if you need to move away
Yeah.
for your work, your school, your spouse, or for fun, that's fine. As long as we're not fighting, that's
Yeah.
fine. I will answer your phone calls and I will see you when you want to see me. As long as we're on good terms, then it's a good and healthy relationship. And I just think
Yeah.
like my mom had such a close relationship with her father that maybe it's that expectation that we were going to like see each other every day and do everything every day. And to me, it's just, okay, well, I have work and kids, and now I live farther away. I live across, and not farther, but I live across a bridge now. It's a little bit farther. So it's just kind of that, what does it have to look like? Like healthy adult child to parent relationships can look like a lot of things. I feel like as long as we're talking, we're
Yeah.
good. And your kids are older than mine. So I'm curious what that feels like that would look like for you guys.
Well, it's interesting how that works out generationally too, right?
Mm,
Because it's like I think like for me, like with my parents, I have decided I'm gonna call them every week. And
okay.
that's kind of what I do. And I don't like talking on the phone that much, but I'm like, I'm gonna honor my parents by talking to them once a week.
Okay.
And we got a pretty good relationship. Like we just talk about current events and stuff.
Okay.
And it's like, okay. But and I feel like it's kind of like an adult to adult relationship. Like I
Right.
don't feel like they're looking down on me or that I have to do things to please them.
Mhm.
I think like it's interesting, you know, when you get into a situation where you feel like the parent needs something from the child. And it's like my kid
Right.
this
Right.
morning,
Yeah.
my 15-year-old, I was like, hey, want me to walk you to school? Like I had the day off, I can walk you to
Yeah.
school. And I'm like, and I when I'm asking that, I want to make sure that they know that this isn't like me being needy. It's just if you want me to
Right.
walk you to school,
Right.
I will.
I
If it's
have
not
this
cool for
time I
your
can
dad to
spend
do
with
that,
you. Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I always want to kind of keep that mentality with them. It's like you were saying, it's
Yeah.
like if you need distance, like have distance. Like
Sure.
it's, you know, I'm
Yeah.
I'm here for you, whatever you need. Um, so I mean, like for me, that's what I want my relationship with the kids to do be. I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know how to tell another parent though, you know, don't ever need your kids. Right. Like,
Right. 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 Right.
and so I mean, like I think it all is so subjective and it's like whatever you need. Like I think I get the feeling that my parents need me to call them once a week.
Okay.
And so and I think it's keeping that relationship. But I
Right.
also
That's what
want
makes
to,
them feel connected.
yeah, yeah. And I think with my kids, like I don't know, like I'm very fortunate because my kids like being around me.
Okay.
And so it's like they'll spend as much time with me as I want anyways. Like it's like I'm
Yeah.
like, hey,
Good.
I'm going to the grocery store. And sometimes all three of them will pile in the car with me just
Right.
to go
Right.
get groceries, right? Because
Yeah.
they just
Yeah.
want to hang out. And it's like it's cool. And I mean, part of it too is because I'm away now, like once every second week, I'm gonna be gone.
Sure.
And so there's like value in me being home and they want to reconnect. So, but yeah, I don't know if I answered your question really.
No, I think so. It's all conversation. So yeah.
Well, and I mean, like, it's like honor your parents in whatever way you can. I think, like, I think that's still like a biblical principle I hold to, is like, I'm going to honor my parents. And, with my kids, like, they're at different places with their faith. And so they're like, maybe more along the lines of like, respect should be earned.
Okay.
And so it's kind of interesting. Like, if you have like children that don't have like that whole, I must obey the Bible on everything.
Yeah.
That's different. Like, now they're going to have different terms for things. And that's so true. It's like, all right, well, I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. It's, I don't have a straight answer for it.
I'll take it.
Yeah. It's complicated. That's like, I got somebody messaged me and they're like, so how do you feel about the monarchy? And I'm like, it's complicated.
Yeah, that's not an easy question for sure.
No, but I think like people often have easy answers for these things. And those people have already posted on Facebook.
Yes.
All right. So you wanted to talk about newlywed marriage experts.
I just thought you would find this one hilarious, and I'll have to send you the video, but it was by I think it was a TikTok. I'm not actually on it because I'm old, but it was a college age, newlywed that was like, these are our boundaries for my husband and I in college. We don't ever sit next to somebody of the opposite sex.
Oh yeah.
We try not to have professors of the opposite sex. I have one male professor, but my husband sits next to me during that class.
Were they for real or were they being funny?
I think it was legit. Like I should look up her account and see if it all kind of gels and if it's real. And in like discussion boards, when you have to do discussion boards in school, she was like, and we don't respond to people of the opposite sex in discussion boards, like even on a message board.
Oh yeah.
It was like, oh, this girl in class, Riley, made a good point and I'm going to reply. And she was like, I am not comfortable with that. So don't do that. And those were her boundaries in her marriage. And I just, like, they're making it work for now. How long is that even feasible? Like, even pretending that was rational, how long can you keep that up until you go into the real world? You're in a job, you have to work next to somebody, you have to be, on a bus, you have to like, or whatever. It was just the most ridiculous thing. I don't know. It really struck me insane. And I'm like, if you need that strong of a boundary, there's already a problem.
Well, I think, like there's a big thing about the Billy Graham rule.
It's coming around again.
Like, was it Matt Chandler?
I think so. Yeah. Oh yes.
So that whole thing, right? And I'm like, okay, like, here's the thing. Like, I'm like, again, without getting political, there is a thing about power dynamics. Yeah. And how you get yourself into situations with power dynamics. And I mean, like, I guess this is where, like, I'm like, I don't understand why we have so much power in the church to begin with. Like, it's silly because we're just begging for bad things to happen. It's like, why are we giving people all this power? Yeah. But like, it's like, okay, so he should have Billy Graham ruled all of that. And then that would have solved the problem. And I'm like, I think like we just need to stop being weird about this stuff. And
just don't make it weird.
Yeah. And I know, like, initially, like, cause like I didn't really understand the whole Billy Graham rule thing until I got into a relationship, with a woman whose dad was a pastor. Okay. And then she's just like, oh, you're having that lady over to, that girl over to study with you. You shouldn't be alone with the girl. And I'm like, well, why? Okay. And I had no idea. And then it started being explained to me. And then, I got married and I'm like, felt kind of weird about having friends on Facebook that are female. Yeah. And I'm like, well, maybe I won't friend that person because that's a woman. And like, it kind of worked out that with podcasting, I would like never have a woman on my podcast. Right. And
enter me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like kind of funny because I was thinking about this because you were talking about adding your other friend to this podcast. And I'm like, oh, good. Then we're going to be following the Billy Graham rule. We could title that podcast episode, Bridge follows the Billy Graham rule.
She will love that. That'll be great.
But I mean, like in the end, it's just kind of like, what are the specific scenarios? Because I'm like, I don't think we need to throw out being smart about situations in which you might be tempted. Like at this whole like, oh, people will talk because you're having, food with a woman. It's like, that's stupid. Like, I don't care. I guess I'm not a pastor, so I don't have to worry about that stuff. Okay. But like, because people won't talk. And if they do, I'm like, they can talk. That's hilarious.
Right.
But it's like, like what are my boundaries? And I was thinking, well, here it is. Okay. If my house is empty, I'm not going to have a woman over.
Sure.
I'm like, that's just stupid. Like, why would I do that? There's no reason for that. If I'm at a hotel room, I will not invite a woman over.
Sure.
And then I'm like, anything else? I'm like, I don't care. Oh, I'm driving in a car with a woman. It's like, yeah, that's fine. I don't think anything's going to happen in the car.
Right.
And so like, I think that like, there's ways to do that without like, because where the Billy Graham rule becomes a problem is when you start treating women different than men and you're a person in power. And so it's only men that get to have supper with the boss.
Yeah.
Or, lunch with the boss. And it's like, so it's not a simple thing. Or it's just like, oh, you just follow the Billy Graham rule.
Right. And depending
like,
on which way you paint it, it's either women are a threat and we're coming for you. We're gonna get you. Yeah. Or women are a threat and we're gonna say that you did something. Or is it women are so weak, we're gonna be overtaken by, like, we can just be people also. Like, that's fine. And I love to point out, like, all right, well, if you're concerned that somebody is going to say you and so were having an affair because they saw you in a restaurant, why don't you care about having dinner with another man? Like, if it's not, if you're not worried about you being tempted into, physical sin, then you need to be, if you're only concerned about accusations, you can't be alone with anybody because anybody can accuse you of anything.
Yeah. We live in a society where people go both ways.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, I don't know. The whole thing is so silly. And I think that if we didn't have such hangups about this stuff, we could just be friends with people of the opposite sex. Right. And be like the rest of the world where we aren't weird about that stuff.
I have a good friend I text a lot, and I would say most of the time, if it's going on longer or I think Andrew's friends with him also. So it'll just be like, oh, he said this, he's already seen this movie. This is what he thinks, or, oh, he hasn't, but just, we usually end up talking about movies, but I feel like none of it's a secret, but it's also not like, here, read my texts, make sure everything's okay. Would you type them for me? Like and I love when you use silly for something, because it makes it less scary, but it totally dismisses it. Like it's perfect. I've started to use that.
It's a less angry way of addressing things.
So stupid. No, it's just silly. People are just
it's silly. People be silly. And I mean, silly. Like, I would say, like, as far as emotional affairs, because I think that is a thing too. It's like, I am not going to complain about my marriage to a woman. Right. Yeah. I'm like, that's a boundary for me. It's like, I can't, that's temptation. Yeah. And I mean, like, and that's my personal boundary, because I know I can be friends with women and nothing's going to happen. But yeah, those are basically my 3 rules. No hotel rooms, no house, and no talking about my marriage in a negative way. I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And then, that bond starts, and I'm always like, no, it's whose text messages you're the most happy to see come in when you're like, oh, maybe calm down a little bit, like, but that's what I would be more worried about, of like, this person's your new best friend. Like, no, that's me. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's something to set with each other, but I mean, like, I mean, the whole, like, oh, you can't have a female professor or whatever. It's like, avoid that. I'm like, okay, now you're just kind of in the crazy town, it's like, you guys, these aren't your boundaries. These were the boundaries that were passed down to you in a very fundamentalist setting. Yes. Like, this is not making sense. This is not logical. I would love to be in the class that she's coming in, and she's like, can you guys move? I need to sit behind and between girls, like, and just scooching people around. So she's just like in this, it's a coven, what she wants, really. I need my lady buffer. A lady buffer. I like that. Okay. Ducks and geckos. This is just, I don't know, when my brain is allowed to wander,
And I feel like I've mentioned this before, but this is the stuff that I turn to my husband and I'm like, how have we never thought? So again, I know it's stupid. Ducks, they can just swim and they know it. They walk into the water and they just float off. But one day the water freezes over and they're like, here, I'm going to land and walk into my nice, like little water and go swimming. And they don't go in the water. Like what? This is so stupid. But what goes through a duck's head? I mean, honestly, just all of a sudden the water's not there. You know, I feel like that.
Do they get angry?
It's got to be really weird. Do they get angry about it? Are they confused? And
are they sad? Or are they instinctually like, oh, okay, cool. This means I do whatever I do in the winter.
Or do they have no thoughts in their head and they're just like, well, I guess I'll go over there. And I think I threw in geckos because we have a sticky toed gecko and it cracks me up that he just came out of his little egg and he can climb up a wall. He does not know that that's weird. He doesn't know that that's, not normal. Yeah. Every now and then when the enclosure is wet, he can't. And I think that's when he gets like, why can't I walk on walls? But I don't know, just the weird lives that animals have, this that runs through my head when my imagination is allowed to wander.
Well, I think that's true of people too. Like there's people that just naturally do things.
Right.
And it's like, different predispositions. There we go. We all have different predispositions. Yeah. Those things.
Sometimes we're good at the things right away,
Yeah. I've been doing the audiobook. I always like differentiate between whether I'm actually reading something or listening to the audiobook. Maybe that's a little ableist.
Yeah, don't say that on Twitter. I'll get you. Because blind people don't read when they listen to audiobooks. Yeah, I got you.
I know. And it's funny that people like get angry over this stuff, like where they're just like, oh, I can't believe people are telling me now what I can say on Twitter. And it's like, have you ever thought of, I don't know, being empathetic towards someone who does have a disability?
Yeah.
And try to figure out like how you can approach it in such a way. Like we can minimize the damage that's done. I mean, so many things are just harm reduction. It's like, I can use words that are more harm reductive.
Yeah, just by being a touch nicer. Sometimes we can that costs you nothing. Just
anyway, okay. So
nicer.
The book is Atomic Habits. And
yes, I read that one.
Yeah, and so I think what he was saying, like he talks about what your natural proclivity is. Oh, I said it.
You got it. There we go.
Oh no, it was predisposition. I was trying to say.
Dispositions. Right? Well, this one's better.
So many words. Okay. So anyways, okay. So proclivity. And he said like you can seek to have a career in which the thing that comes easy to you, which is, I feel like that's not what I was taught. Like I was taught, I'm going to go get a math degree because people hate math and that'll make me very employable.
Okay. Yeah.
When in reality, what I could have done is actually gone to college and had a philosophy major. Because I remember like doing a little bit of like, I think I had one day where they were talking about philosophy. I'm like, holy crap, this is stupid easy. How do people take an entire like major in this? Theology or philosophy is just like stupid simple. And I'm like, it's common sense. All of it's common sense. This, then this, then this. Like it all follows. It just makes sense. It just clicks.
Okay.
And a couple months ago, I was talking to my buddy Dan King, who did a really weird episode of ADD Masterminds with me. It was the first time I've ever had to mark it as explicit. So,
oh, really?
I'm sure that the original members of this podcast would be very upset to hear that episode, but they probably
go find it.
I'll
go back in the archives.
Yeah. Anyways, he said to me, he's like, I'm a comedian, and he's like, you're a philosopher, and I'm like, holy crap, that is what I do.
Right.
I could have been a philosophy major. I probably would have kicked butt at that.
Yeah.
And it's like we tend to discourage people from doing what they do best. And
like if it's not instantly, like, oh, you're going to get such a good job from going into that field, then it's just, even though you're good at it, you need to find something else. Go work with numbers, John. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, no complaints. Like I'm great at what I do.
Yeah.
And I love that I can podcast. And I think that's where I get all my philosophy out.
That's right.
Even though I didn't know it was philosophy, but I think I'm realizing it is. I'm very philosophical. And I love it when friends bring out observations that you're like, oh, okay, I didn't know that about me, and now I do. But the other thing I thought was really interesting is that it's like, to be like, you may not be like the guy who created Dilbert, who's a whole political thing in himself, which we won't get into. But I love this. Like, there's a lot of undertones where I'm like, I'm not saying this. But he was like, he said that he's like, I'm a pretty good artist. Like, I'm an okay drawer, but that alone wouldn't have made me famous. Yeah. But he's like, I'm also a comedy writer, and I'm pretty good at that. And he mashed those together, and he made this. And also he knows a lot about Alphys culture. Sure. And when he mashed those three things together, there was magic. And it's like, that's interesting to me too. It's like when people are like, well, Bridge, you could never have a career in philosophy. It's like, okay, but what if I combine philosophy, industrial hygiene, my job, sure, and podcasting or whatever, right? Like, there's a combination where you can be the best at what you do because you're the only person doing it.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, not to say that we have to be the best either. Like, that's the thing. It's like, I don't.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways. Okay. Here's a little philosophical thing for me. Yeah. It's like, we can use labels as walls we live within, or frameworks from which we build.
Oh.
And so, like, when we take, you take like your Enneagram test, and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is who I am. It's a wall for me to live within. And it's like, no. This is what you build on. Right. Do you know what your Enneagram number is?
Oh, I'm a 4, I believe, wing 5. It kind of varies, but the 5, I think, is like the investigator, and I can go down a rabbit hole. So usually I'm solidly awesome. 4, but I think wing 5.
I wanted to be a 4 wing 5.
You're a 4 3,
I'm a
right?
4 wing 3. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'm a bit of an exhibitionist. No. But it's like, I try to understand everything from an emotional point of view. And then I have to share it with everyone. That
you're speaking my language. I absolutely get it. Oh, that's interesting. Cause I can see using, cause like in the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INFJ. So, and they're INFJ. Usually very similar. Is that the protagonist? I don't think so. They're very much like 4s. Like, I think there's a lot of overlap. What is it? Intuition. There's something about feeling in there, judging. I can't remember what their sensitivity is in there somewhere, but I can see where it can turn into like, no, this is how I am, and that's how I'm going to be. Or you can use it and learn and, figure out what works for you and how you can challenge yourself. My husband is an 8. And while he's not interested in learning pretty much anything about it at all, every now and then he'll say something and he'll be like, is that the 8 in me? And I'm like, yeah, that's the 8. Or it's helped me. A 4 and an 8 is a huge deal. So it's helped me figure out, oh, he's not being mean, and he's not mean, but he's just, I'm telling the truth. So that's not mean to say the thing that's true, and I'm like, but tact, so just being able to just kind of go like, oh, okay, now I understand us better in that dynamic. It's been really helpful. But there's definitely people that are like, no, this is how I am. This is how I'm going to be. There's no way around it. It's not your height. It is something you can change, and you can work on and improve. It's not permanent.
Even if it is your height, it's like, get a ladder. Like,
oh, I like that. Okay.
All right. I'm ENFJ, which is the protagonist. Okay. Extroverted, intuitive feeling, and judging. Oh, interesting. Judging.
Okay. So I'm trying to get away from judging. 3. You as an extrovert makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
The J, it's either J or P, and it's judging or perceiving. And honestly, I can't tell the difference. No matter how many times I read them, I cannot process what the difference is between the judge and the perceive. I don't know.
Perceiving is a huge thing. And it's like, and so, I mean, like, I will gather all the information and kind of form a point of view on things, but I hold to it like quite lightly. And I'm realizing this is something I'm realizing that I think is really interesting, because I was just I was at a job where they wanted me to do some monitoring that made no sense to me. I was like, this is dumb. I know that the answer is going to be low. Like there's no such thing as zero in industrial hygiene. Like we'll test something and we'll be like, well, this is the minimum that it measures. And so it's some value less than 1 or some value less than 0.1. We'll never say 0. But so it was some value less than 1 in this case, right? I was like, it's going to be some value less than 1. But because they complained about this and they want to know, I have to go test it anyways. Sure. Now, there have been situations where I'm like, there's no way this is going to be here. And then I test and I find it there.
Okay.
And so I was like, so there's also an off chance that I'm going to be wrong on this. And it made me realize that my occupation is formational to my personality, because I'm realizing that's how I approach everything. I'm like, I really think it's this, but I'm not going to say it.
Okay.
Because it needs to be tested still.
All right. I feel like, all right, that's really, really relatable. That I'm always like, you leave that door open of like, could be wrong. Maybe not. Weirder things have happened, but I can't imagine how this would happen. And my kids are such literalists. I use that a lot of like, I can't imagine that happening or being the case. And it gets me out of saying that it was absolutely not going to be the case.
Yeah.
And out of the mom, you said, but no, that makes a lot of sense.
But I think if you're like a teacher or a preacher, you're more willing to talk in absolutes because you're trying to give knowledge to people. Yeah. And for me, I'm like, well, the jury's still out on like everything. Like all
absolutely
things,
everything.
Always.
As sure as we are, we won't know till we're there,
Yeah. Yeah. Which actually, it's funny because I was reading Lecrae made like a Twitter thread where he's talking about what's healthy deconstruction and what's unhealthy deconstruction. I'm like, ooh, this should be interesting. And essentially what he said is like a healthy deconstruction is what we see historically in Christianity, where they would actually see if things align with scripture. And that's healthy deconstruction. And he's like, what I'm seeing among the millennials is an unhealthy deconstruction where they're seeing, what does society think? Okay. And I'm like, this is that us versus them mentality. And this is where like I might lose some of our listeners if we still have our fundamentalist listeners, because I'm just like, okay, here's the thing is like the us versus them is so damaging. I saw like one of the guys from Babylon B saying, it's funny how people who deconstruct, people who lose their faith end up in therapy. And it's kind of like he's trying to insinuate that it is the mentally ill that cease to believe in God.
Yeah.
And I'm like, again, this is an us versus them thing. We're superior because we still believe in God. And I'm like, that is so disgusting to me. And I kind of look at that and I'm like, that's why, like, I don't know if I want to be a part of your club.
See, I saw that scrolling and I was like, no, to me, that more says people leaving, for me, deconstruction hasn't been God and Jesus in general. It's been evangelicalism. So for me, it was more, I saw it briefly and thought it was more like, see how damaging it is that when you get out and you get a breath, that you have to have somebody kind of talk things out and walk things out with you. And I had to do that. And lots of, is this initial reaction normal? And just no, most people don't jump right to that or think that thing or process that way. I didn't see it as like, oh, see, they end up in therapy because they crazy. Like I didn't get it that way, but
and I think
really
people conclude it differently.
Now.
And I think like it's Joel Berry, right? Joel Berry, he then like replied to some of these people. He's like, yes, I did anticipate that you were going to say there's trauma from the church and stuff like that. But then he kind of launched into making fun of the people who were saying that and just saying, oh, they think they're being so original, but they're saying the same thing. And I'm like, can we just not have this drama? Like, I'm like, here's the thing. I'm like, I'm walking through this, I'm walking through this right now.
Parroting each other. What if they really are all limping? Just because 100 people give you the same answer, it doesn't mean that it's popular. It just means that they've gone through the same thing. It's worth it to see if it's, trendy, but no, when it's dismissive like that, I hate that.
Well, and it's just like, here's my thing is like, I think that Christian spaces are more toxic than non-Christian spaces. Yeah. So I would rather eat with sinners kind of like, that guy,
Mhm.
Korean Jesus.
That dude, Korean
This-
Jesus.
I
Did
want
you
to
watch
title this
Kim's
one Korean
Convenience?
Jesus.
Do it. The Korean Jesus of Kim's Convenience was like the best thing I ever saw.
Oh, it's so great.
Korean Jesus and geckos.
So I don't know. I would say like a healthy deconstruction is where you still stay on the side of love.
Yes, it has to push you more towards love, less towards. I for me, it was just a lot of, I instantly think this thing about this topic or this person. Why? And if it's because somebody in a suit, up 3 little stairs told me that, then I'm gonna let it go. If Jesus didn't say it, I'm done. Like then it's fine. So
Up
I'm just
3
trying to
little
go
stairs
right,
is,
like 3 little
awesome.
steps,
This is the
and
3
now
little
you're in
steps.
charge.
Now we have to hear what this guy has to
Right?
say.
Much like a pharmacist, up that little step, he's in charge.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was if it came from him, if I got it from that, then I'm gonna put that down. But
Yeah.
otherwise, just what did Jesus say? There's
Yeah.
I know it's easy enough to just look for the red letters in the Bible, but there's Bibles that you can get, or just small books that are literally just what Jesus said. That's
Yeah.
it in the canon. And I've been like, I have to just grab one of those. Like, I would just like to read through that for a very long time. And then I'll go back into like the rest of it. But I just want to know what he said. If he came through my town and talked to me and called me daughter and called me sister, how would that have changed my life?
Yeah.
Instead of, what did this guy 3 steps up tell me about him? I'd like to meet him for myself.
Well, and I'm just really convinced, like you learn through parenting, what kind of heart God has for his children. And it's like, and I kind of look at my kids and I'm like, hey, I get it. You're mad.
Yeah.
You're angry. You're having a hard time believing in God. And I'm like, I think he gets that. I don't think he's angry at you for that. Like, and I'm like, it's crazy to me that, I guess what it comes down to too is like, I think that like the view that we have of God really influences the view we have of our roles. Like if my God is manipulative and will do everything he can to make you do what he wants you to do, what kind of parent? You're going to be that kind of parent. Right. And that's so disgusting. Yeah. When in the end, it's just kind of like, okay, well, just love and let your children make mistakes. You can tell them, hey, like, I don't think you should do this. And they're like, well, I really want to do this. And then you're just be like, okay. Yeah. Okay, we'll see how this goes. Like the prodigal son. Yeah. And it's like, and I'll be here for you if you want to come back. Right. And it's not even like, I don't think it's even like, I'll be here for you when you come back. Right. Like, and I think that's kind of the attitude that the church has toward those who are deconstructing. Yeah. It's like, we'll be here for you when you come back. And it's like, well, they might not come back. Are you going to love them even if they don't come back? Oh, absolutely. My kids are small. They're doing weird little mistakes in their lives, but I'm hoping to be able to be like, this is why, as someone who's been alive a lot longer than you, this is why I think that's a bad idea. Yeah. But you go do what you need to do. And sometimes it works out. And sometimes, it's all right. See, that's why I said that. But and that's part of it too, is having the humility to just be like, okay, I said you that this was a mistake, but actually you were okay. And I'm glad it worked out for you. I am not rooting for you to fail so I can be right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a healthier form of parenting, a healthier form of leadership. Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I think a lot about like, there's a lot of people who have like very unhealthy views of themselves and they have like self-hatred. Yeah. And it's hard for me to like understand, maybe because of just how I've walked through things, because it's like, I guess there must have been a time maybe when I was a teenager where I had some self-hatred and I'm like, oh, such a loser. Yeah. And now I'm just kind of like, all right, like I love myself. I know I'm too much for people sometimes. And so I feel like I have to kind of scale back sometimes so that I'm more tolerable to people. But it's like, I love that about me anyways. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know how to walk someone from self-hatred to self-love. Like, I'm like, because it's just, I don't know how I got to where I am.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I've definitely had self-hatred going on. I don't
Yeah.
think that I do that anymore, but like just any confidence in I bring something to the table, or like I know that to say that I'm good at anything still doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But I've
Okay.
gotten better at it.
Yeah.
But I remember I was listening to a podcast and the author was like, and I wrote this piece and because of this thing and that thing, and because I'm just like such a writer, or I know that I can write, I'm good at this. And I was like, you allowed to say that? Like, as a Christian woman, can you say that you are good at something? And it was just more like, oh, okay. I mean, especially if it's something that you've worked hard at, you've earned that. But if it's something that is a natural talent for you, that's given to you for a reason, right? If you're created and that's given to you for a purpose, don't talk down to that. Is what I've been trying to tell myself. And I'm like, if I can relate to people well, then I should be able to say that. If that's a God-given quirk or talent of mine, I can sing. I should be able to say that and not feel like I'm being so prideful. But if God gave me that, then I need to have confidence in that because of him.
Well, okay. So like giftedness, right? And it's like, if you're told you're gifted in any way, it's just kind of like, okay, well, thanks for acknowledging that. That's cool. But like, I did nothing to earn it because it's a gift. And so, and it's like, but then you hone your gift, right?
Right. Yeah.
So then you can say, okay, well, I've honed my craft. So I can say that I earned a little bit of it.
Okay. Yeah.
But I started with like kind of that baseline, that framework. Again, it's a framework that I built on. And it's like, it's a God-given framework, but it's like, and then circumstances also, which are God-given circumstances.
Yeah.
Also maybe people-given circumstances. I mean, like, it's crazy. Like, what makes us who we are is so complex.
Yeah.
And part of it is who we decide to be too. So I think there is kind of a role of self in there where you can say, well, I'm fortunate, but I also worked really hard to get to where I am.
Oh yeah, it's both and, as they say.
It is. But I guess for me, it's like, I will not feel superior to someone because I think the way I think, because I'm like, well, no. This brain is great at some things and really bad at normal things.
You preaching to the choir. I will solve a riddle I cannot get from my house to like up the street without a GPS. There's some stuff that I'm like, I'm lost. And then others that I'm like, we're in an escape room. I will have us out before you know it. Like
oh, that's awesome. That's a great skill.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah. That's why I was like, I'm smart in other ways.
Yeah. No, there's book smart, there's street smart. I'll touch each of them just a little bit, but absolutely smart in other ways makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like I was like, I've got so many things on the ADD master list that are like super old.
Yeah, I've been scrolling through.
Like I had one that was like, it was actually a joke about the gay community.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't. But I was telling my kid about it and she says it's okay. So this is what I was thinking. Okay. So whenever I hear the term gay community, which I don't think people really use anymore. Now they just say like LGBTQ or whatever, right? But when they say gay community, I just thought it was funny because I'm just like picturing all these like happy people say, hey buddy, hey buddy.
It sounds like a great place to live. Honestly, I would love to visit a gay community. I think I would have the best time.
It's always sunny. It's always sunny in the gay community.
I feel like saying lots of color is like reductive, but it's gonna be beautiful. You know that it's gonna be gorgeous.
Totally. All right. Yeah. So another old thing was thermometer versus furnace. And I think the point of this is like, you go into like a social situation. Are you going to be a thermometer or are you going to be a furnace?
Oh, okay.
But I was just thinking like, I don't think we have to be furnaces all the time.
No.
Like to be an empath, you're the thermometer in the room. And then maybe you decide whether it needs a furnace or not.
I like that. I use that a lot in in births and like doula work to kind of get I usually go in like, hey, let's have a baby. This is going to be great. And read from there. Like I try to come in like, let's make it a party and read from there. If mom's like, yeah, let's have some fun. Let's joke about it. We'll keep that going. But there's always a moment when it's like, oh, we just got serious. Mom's in the weeds. Like, let's take a deeper breath, so I try to take that temperature and then keep it from getting too hot, keep it from getting too cold. Do we need to be lighter? Do we need more music? Are you going into a spiritual zone right now? Or are we going to laugh this baby out? What are we going to do? And that's, that's come in really handy. So I think I can manage to do both. So that's something I'm good at, and I'll say it.
Yeah. Well, and that's very Enneagram 4. Like, it's like and I mean, it's just that whole, I am emotion. It's who I am.
In a glass case of emotion. Yeah, I feel all the things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like the hardest thing about being an empath is like, how do you deal with people that are mean? Because I almost like, I struggle to tell them they're being mean because I know this is not going to go well. They're not going to believe me that they're being mean.
Adults called each other out when we're mean, I can't even imagine. Like it gets written off as maybe you're just sarcastic or a little bit cynical, or this is their no, you might just be being mean.
Yeah, you need to develop a thicker skin.
Yes, yeah. Or my favorite was always like, he's not mean. That's just his personality. His personality is mean then. Like that's just how it has to be.
And what is so whack is I think that we've allowed that stuff to the point where Christian community is more mean than non-Christian community.
Yeah.
And it's like, how does that happen? Like, this is why people don't want to go to church.
Yeah. Because they're being mean in the name of the Lord, the way that they like to just go and attack people and write people off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm like, is there a way back? Is there a path back? And I'm like, I'm not entirely sure. Cause it's like, as long as the Christian church does not get off their high horse, they're just going to stay that way forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like
from a very tall horse.
Yeah. And it's got 3 steps.
3 steps up. Yep.
Okay. So something I heard at some point in my life was young adults have no sense of their own mortality, nor the mortality of others. And that's why they make good soldiers.
I feel like I've read that or heard that as well. And it makes a lot of sense. Because I know while I had, the Christian guilt and the Christian worry of like, what will happen when I die? I still slept very well at night. And now it keeps me up, my mortality. As I see my kids getting older, I'm not going to be there someday. Like, how's that going to be? Oh my gosh, I need to have another baby because that'll keep me alive forever. I'm not going to do it. But the idea, and I think that's just another reason when, like, especially with, the wars and stuff, when they enlist so young and they go in so young, and then that sense of invincibility is suddenly shattered either with near death or losing a friend, or God forbid, losing a body part or something like that's why it's so extra shattering and traumatic, because they were in the height of, I'm going to live forever. I can, I'm going to have this, I'm going to go do this cool thing, live action video game, and come back a hero. And when that illusion is shattered, that has to be tremendously traumatic. No, that makes a ton of sense why they're good soldiers. And I think you're so able to disassociate from somebody that you're not actually speaking to, or maybe even that you are, that going off and shooting whoever else, is out there that you're against is too easy. Is that cost of their life real to you if you're out there and I've only seen war movies, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. I could be completely wrong, but yeah, young, they go out as boys and face all of that. It's always sad to me.
Yeah, war is such a horrible thing, and it's kind of it's interesting to me how like so there's kind of this like heroism, and this assumption that person wears that uniform, so they're a hero from some people, And then other people are like, that person wears a uniform, so they're a murderer. And it's like that whole thing is so much complexity because people are just like, well, freedom comes at a price. Right. But I'm like, I think freedom comes at a price of our soldiers, their soldiers, our civilians, their civilians. Like there's just so much tragedy and it has such a ripple effect. It's kind of like, how are we getting into this situation to begin with? And I'm like, because there's a lot of wars that have been fought and people died and it wasn't necessary. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's ever necessary. Like, it's like, why do we get to this point where death is the answer?
Right. No, and there's, I mean, I live a very blessed, lucky life, you know, but I've never come to a point of like, well, I need to physically fight somebody because I've been wronged. So I just, other than power mad leaders, like how does it get that way on a global scale? I don't understand the complexity. You know, the times that it has been, you know what, you're oppressing us and we need freedom. Totally. Like that makes perfect sense. It also drives me a little bit crazy, and this is the tangent of when, and I don't know if this is a Canadian thing as well, but it tends to happen a lot here. I feel that when patriotism, and I don't mean necessarily Christian nationalism, I won't get political, I promise, but when patriotism and being in the military seems to go hand in hand with Christianity, or being a good heavenly citizen, like we did growing up, we did a show that celebrated the birth of the nation and freedom, and it was this huge patriotic whatever, but there was very little gospel, but very much like, we're thanking you for all your service, like everybody stand and we're going to clap for you. And I remember my mom's big concern was like, but did we tell them about Jesus, or did we just tell them like, thank you for all of this? Because just because you went and you fought and you're now a veteran, it doesn't pay that debt necessarily. And while we're grateful for that, like it doesn't, there just tends to be this like good Christian military family, just assumption a lot, I feel. I don't know if that's a universal thing or if that's like so very American, you know.
I don't like, I think that there is an element of that in Canada. Okay. I don't think it's as widespread. Okay. I mean, we have Remembrance Day once a year, and that's always kind of like freedom's bought at a price. And it always kind of assumes that it's our soldiers that paid the price. And I'm like, I think everybody in society is touched by this. And it's like, and I don't understand. There's actually, you can get like, so there's red poppies that we wear for Remembrance Day, and you can get a white poppy, and a white poppy represents no more war. So it's like mourning the victims of war, but also saying no more war. And I'm like, I like that. Yeah. Because I just like war is not love. And, you know, Jesus said, you know, like, you know, greater love has no man but lay down his life. You know, that was a really butchered King James. But I'm missing a few words. But why use many words when few
do trick?
But it's like, lay down your life for someone else. Yeah. And people have like looked at that and said, yeah, that's like being a soldier. And it's like, laying down your life, I think, is saying, you know what? I am going to give up my rights here. Maybe I'll give up my right to a gun. Maybe I'll give up my right to an opinion in this situation. And if we had more of that, I think we would have people that are like saying, wow, I think the world's becoming a better place. And it's like, and if we could be instrumental in making the world a better place, we've got something. We've got something that the world needs. And whether you want to bring, you know, the name Jesus into it, because it's kind of interesting, because I made a post on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this, but I was like, what if Jesus' name was Eric? And this one guy replied to me, he's like, but the name Jesus means he saves. And I'm like, yeah, but what if Eric died for your sins?
Love it.
And I mean, like, it's just kind of like, it's
Yeah.
branding. Like, it feels like branding at some level. And I think even, you know, like, and maybe I'm really getting heretical here, but I'm just kind of like,
I'm here for it. Bring it.
for me, it's like, if somebody gets my name wrong, and I mean, I have a couple names anyways. You can call me John, you can call me Bridge, you can call me whatever, right? But I'm like, if someone gets my name wrong, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So why do we serve a God that's so insecure that he's like, my name is not Eric, you're going to hell now, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I'm like, that doesn't bother me. If someone gets my name wrong, that doesn't bother me. But what does bother me is if someone gets my heart wrong. So I think it's possible that it's the same with God. And I think that we have a ton of people, like an inordinate amount of people who have the name right.
Yeah.
And they have the heart completely wrong.
Dude, that is so good, John. Oh my God. I was listening to something, and now I want to say that it was one of Rob Bell's books. If it wasn't, it was a podcast where they were talking about missionary work and the idea of like, no one had ever heard this before. And they went in and they were like, no, this was the Son of God and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh, Jesus is his name? Oh, okay. Like they had that story.
Yeah.
And believed that. And it was revealed to them without scripture, without whatever, but I don't want to be like, it checked all the boxes, but they were like, oh, that's who that is. Okay. We know him already. And it was just this, why do we expect that God said he'll reveal himself to everybody? He'll do it how he wants to, whether it is through, he revealed himself through plenty of dreams and at least one talking animal. Why not? You know, why do we think that he has not? The idea that I know we've been told to go out and make disciples, but the idea that he's not able to reach these certain people unless we go there and do it for him seems like such pride, you know, like he'll get there when he wants to.
What is the meaning of go and make disciples? Get people to say those words.
Right.
Get people to say the right magic words.
Right. And discipleship isn't conversion. It isn't getting saved. Right. You know, it's more of a teaching, the ways type thing, you know?
Well, that's it, right? Like, okay, so like God is love. Jesus is the way, truth, and life of love.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no one gets to the Father, but I'm like, well, no one gets to the Father. Who is love? Nobody gets to the Father except by this way, this truth, this life.
Yeah.
And so I kind of look at it, I'm like, okay, so basically God is love. He's calling me to get into the flow of what love's already doing. And when I get out of that flow, I need to ask for forgiveness, and then I get back into that flow. And that's my Christianity. I can't get away from Christianity because I really believe in that. But I'm not worried about the words so much as the heart of it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in a lot of ways, the church has lost her heart.
Yeah.
And so like when I see people who are like, I just don't believe in God anymore. It's like, okay, but do you believe in love? Can we find that?
Yeah.
Because it's like when you deconstruct and you lose your love, that's bad deconstruction. When you deconstruct and you find love, that is good deconstruction.
Yeah. I'm with
Sorry, LeCrae, you're wrong. Because
I
honestly,
love you.
this is the thing. Like on Facebook, I made this post and it made people angry and it was kind of fun. But I said, if you feel like you have to use the Bible to oppress people, maybe stop reading the Bible. And then, you know, some of my friends were like, well, no, it means you need to read the Bible more. And I'm like, no, if it's making you a worse person, reading it more is not going to fix it. And I'm like, and I still read the Bible daily, but I kind of look at it and I'm like, I'm reading the Old Testament. God's really angry. I don't really get it. I'm not going to cause it to reform the way I act. Like, I'm like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of times we use the angry God as a reason to be terrible to other people.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not the way of love.
It's speaking the truth in love, you know, of you know, God's mad at you, so I'm going to be mad at you until you get your ass right. Sorry. But
yeah.
You know, I hate it.
I hate it. And so I'm like, maybe just put it on the shelf for a bit. Maybe put it on the shelf forever. Like, I don't think that you have to. I think that we need to find a way to practice the way of love and seek forgiveness when we fall short of it and get back on the way of love.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of this, fundamentalism and a lot of this like political pushing and getting angry at Disney. Yeah. I don't think that's the way of love. Like, I'm like, that's you guys are getting way off the path. It's like, it's pretty simple to just like love people.
Right.
And I think, like I was having a conversation with someone, family member, who probably won't hear this. So, but yeah, but I was talking to them about love, and I'm like, we just need to love people. And they were like, okay, but if you have a 2-year-old and that 2-year-old is going to do something that's going to hurt them, it's not going to feel like love to them when I'm loving them and I don't let them do that thing. And I was like, I think we overestimate who the 2-year-olds are.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just this very condescending faith, which I'm like, that's not the way of love.
Yeah, there's no way of doing
assuming
that without
what's
putting
best
yourself
for
above
everyone.
Somebody. Absolutely. I follow a lot of LGBT Christians on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff that they get that is public is horrible enough. The stuff they get in their DMs is unbelievable. And it's just, why do you think that's going to get people to behave, in the way that you want them to? But what they want to do, whether you think it's right or wrong, is none of your business. Yeah. It's between them and God, and just constantly barraging them with, that they're not the pronoun that they want. They're not this, they're not that. Please don't do that. Like, that's not helping anybody. Nobody's going to go, all right, you were mean enough to me. You hit me hard enough. You're right. That's never going to happen. No.
Well, and it's like, I believe in a God that meets people where they're at.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so it's like, okay, so you're confused about your gender, or you're very sure about your gender.
Sure.
But like, biologically, it doesn't line up. It's like, well, that's something you need to walk through and figure out. Like, I don't understand that at all. Like, I don't know what that's like at all. And so I'm just gonna, you have your story, you tell me your story, I'm gonna hear your story.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna love you where you're at too. And I don't think that God is mad at you for feeling like a girl.
No. And even if he was disapproving, from what I'm seeing in the parables Jesus told, he's just hanging around, like we were talking, not necessarily when you come back, but he's there and he loves you still. He is not, stomping off because you're misbehaving. It's if that's how he feels about these things. But I sense that he's embracing people.
Yeah, and I sense that he's far more angry at the people who are pushing against these people and just trying to say the most hateful things to show that they're not part of those people who want to show how accepting they are, right? Like, it's like, there are people that want to show how accepting they are. And I understand that people are like, that's performative. That's being, that's virtue signaling, right? Like, they look at that and they say, that's so fake. They're just trying to tell everyone they're accepting. And it's like, okay, so what are you going to do now? You're going to be as non-accepting as possible to stick it to those people who are pretending to be accepting. And in the end, you're forgetting. And this is just like the war, when we were talking about war and how it's like the soldiers, they fight and they're the heroes and they're the ones that they're the price that's paid. And it's like, no. There's the civilians that get caught in the crossfire. And our LGBTQ people are the ones getting caught in the crossfire right now.
Absolutely.
And there's no reason for it. Like, there's no reason. They're human beings. They're not a political cause. They are human beings. So how do we love them?
Yeah. Oh my God, was I supposed to answer?
No.
Never gonna. No, I know. It's that awkward pause of like, okay, but
I love, it's funny too. Like, I was talking to someone about podcasting, and it's just kind of like, you gotta keep it going the whole time. And it's like, no, you don't.
No, there's
pauses in conversation.
There's thoughts. It's fine. I hope you leave in that big pause when you went to let people in the front door. like that 8 minutes, that better be there.
That might be painful. I don't know. I always just have to listen and figure out, well, what works here.
Right.
So, but wow, this was
list.
a fun conversation.
This was good.
I love how like, it's like, you know, we can say dumb stuff and have fun and be silly, and then to find that depth in the conversation too. And it's funny too, because like where I'm at with my faith and knowing that this is more of a let's be Christians podcast. It was kind of fun to like, I guess I feel like I'm speaking to evangelicals in this podcast.
Okay. Yeah.
That said, Wax Museum, I keep having theologians on, so I can't really get away from it.
I love it.
I'm going to be talking about the God of consent.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which I think will be very interesting. I read the book. I'm sorry, I don't have the guy's name right now.
I'll find the book.
It's a dissertation.
Oh.
So that's one I'm working on. And then I've got a couple things that going on. Brain not working. I worked for so many days straight, and I'm like, now I'm finally off, and so I'm gonna sit and like just work on. I've got one about into the wilderness, and it's about maintaining your faith even though you've left the church.
Okay. Oh, that sounds good.
So we're touching on a lot of like very like kind of deconstruction kind of themes.
Yeah.
But I think I am definitely going to keep in this vein of like good deconstruction leads you to love, bad deconstruction leads you away from love.
No, it's an excellent filter.
Good religion leads you to love.
Good religion.
Yeah. Bad religion leads you away from love. I mean, it's that simple. And so it's like, I think there are people who are still in the church and they're still pursuing love, and that's awesome. I'm not there right now. Actually, I am going to a church, but it's a very different church. It's very different than what you would think a church would look like.
No, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. It is.
What a teaser of like, doesn't look like a church. Is it a cruise ship? Like,
I'll give you an example. It's very small. It is a church. It's just small. It's very small. But the teaching, I'll give you an example of teaching that I was like, I don't think you would ever see this at a church. The pastor there, one of the pastors, Rich, he was talking about reclaiming Christian practices, and he was talking about reclaiming the Christian practice of hospitality. And he said, I believe there are 3 levels of hospitality. The first one is you just like have a friend over for coffee. It's like, that's easy, right? Yeah. Anybody can do that. And he's like, okay, the second level is like what Jesus talked about, where it's like you invite the person nobody else would want to have over, and you help them with their needs. Then he's like, but I argue there's a third level of hospitality. And that third level of hospitality is where you allow the other person to change you. I was like, you don't teach this at church, because we're supposed to change the world. We're not supposed to let the world change us. But I'm like, that's the problem, is like, you're being condescending. You're not hearing people who are saying, I'm hurting, because you're like, oh, no, we don't talk about that.
No, those levels. I mean, I'm going to think about that for like the rest of the day, of like, the level of bringing in someone you're comfortable with into your home, bringing somebody, do not bark, Bert. Sorry. Bringing somebody you're not comfortable with into your home, but then bringing somebody into, not going to say into your heart, but letting somebody inside of your spirit, your brain, your whatever, your soul, that allows them to change things within you. We got to be incredibly uncomfortable, and something I've not thought of before. I mean, that is a third, giving them a place to be that's not physical. Ooh. Yeah. Ooh. That's a good one.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just a lot of depth to it. And it's like, this is crazy. Like, this is teaching that I've never heard in a church before. And I'm like, this is powerful. But it's like, it's figuring out how to love people and actually listen to society and figure out like, because there's just so many movements that happen through society that the church is like, oh, well, no, that can't be right. It sounds like love, but it's not, guys. It can't be love. And it's like when the Apostle Paul says, who cares who's saying it as long as the gospel is preached?
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's like, we need to actually have an ear to listen to what culture's saying, because every human being is made in the image of God. Therefore, they can teach you something about God.
That's true. God's put his hands on all of us. There's nobody that's not worth listening to.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And so anyways,
good stuff.
We'll do this again in a couple of weeks.
Yes, please.
And thank you so much. It was so good to do this again.
Thank you. It felt good. I'm glad to dig out the headphones.
All right. And we'll have to add your friend next time so we can follow the Billy Graham.
We'll get her in there. Yes, this was scandalous. My husband will listen to the whole thing to make sure that this was appropriate.
I hope he does. This was good.
I hope he does. This was fun.
Okay. Talk to you later.
All right. See ya.
Air Smudge.